Welcome back to Unbiased Magic Reviews. I hope that you guys are staying healthy and safe. Today we're going to be taking a look at Daniel Garcia's Masterclass live lecture series. So if you aren't familiar with Daniel Garcia, he's a very prolific magician. He's put out magic over the years with every major magic company. You've probably heard of some of his products like Fraud, Fallen, Greed, Torn, Pressure. Most recently, Mint Box, which was a clever little gimmicked mint box, enabled you to do a signed card inside of a mint box. It was great effect. So here he participated in Vanishing Inc.'s Masterclass live lecture series, and this was from April 2021, so that was last month. As usual, I'm going to answer those questions that you probably have and give you a rundown of what you can expect if you were to pick up this set of lectures and give you some thoughts. So the first thing we want to go over is what about the ad copy? So Vanishing Inc. is advertising that he's going to give you some new material and some new moves, and I will tell you that that's pretty much misleading. There are a few new things. There's like one or two new pieces that he really teaches you on this lecture series, but taken as a whole, almost everything he teaches you is stuff he's put out over the years, and I'm going to go over that with you. So this felt more like a greatest hits lecture than anything else. So if you've been following along over the years, like me, picking up stuff from Daniel Garcia, then this is probably a lecture you may want to just skip over, because the reality is you're not going to learn a lot of new stuff here. If you're new to his material, then you're going to find a lot of nice little gems here, because like I said, this is like a greatest hits lecture series. So what was my favorite item that was on here? So I really liked his new bill change, and the reason is because it's very visual in usual Daniel Garcia fashion. It reminded me a lot of his effect Greed. There was not a lot of arts and crafts involved to set it up, and it played really well live. When I did it live for people, I got some really big reactions, and I liked how I could immediately hand the bill out, because Daniel Garcia does teach you a way that you can hand out the bill immediately. I thought the angles were good, and I felt like I didn't have to be as careful with the bill as you would, I guess, if you had made a video like I did here to show you what the effect looks like. That was by far my favorite piece on this lecture series. I also liked his perpendicular top change, but that was something that I actually already had learned from his manuscript that he put out back in 2018, which was called Something More. But it was nice to at least see the move in the hand of the creator. So for me, those were the highlights of this lecture series. If you're wondering what was the thing I least liked about the lecture series, was all throughout the lectures, he had his participants keep a notebook, and they were to write some ideas that they had when they woke up in the morning. And on the third week, he went over his creative process for how he creates magic. And it was basically like a jam session, like a brainstorming jam session. And for me, that was probably the worst part of the lecture series. And the main reason is because I thought he could have just spoke about his own creative process, maybe spent 20 or 30 minutes doing that. And then if he wanted to do a brainstorming breakout session with these other people, maybe that could have been like a bonus, or he could have done that during the fourth week instead of the Q&A session, because the Q&A session was almost completely worthless, which I'm going to go over that momentarily for you. You know, Daniel Garcia is part of the creative team for Chris Ramsey's TV show, Big Trick Energy, so I understand that that is a big part of what he does, but spending a whole lecture just on doing like a creative jam session with these people, I felt that was pretty useless for me. Unless you're really big into creating your own magic, then that's probably going to be a big letdown for you. Keep in mind that these lectures aren't cheap either. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what you can expect to learn each week, and then just give you a simple recap at the end here. So week one was all card magic, and there he teaches you about 7 items. The first item is that perpendicular top change that I mentioned. And basically, if you're not familiar with it, you're basically going from this position to this position, and you've done a top change. The nice thing about it is it has a really nice retention of vision aspect to it. I learned it from his manuscript, Something More, but it was nice to see it in his own hands. He gives you some nice tips with it. It is almost a burnable top change, and likely you will replace whatever top change you do now with this one. It really is true. So it was probably the most useful item on week 1. He immediately goes into an effect, which I've never seen him do before. It's called Lie to Me, where he uses the perpendicular top change. Basically, the effect in a nutshell is that you have a spectator make a selection, it's lost in the deck, you ask them to lie to you and tell you what the selection is, but lie to you, tell you a different card. You take out a card, you ask them what is their real selection, and you show it to them that that's the real selection, and then in the next moment, you're actually holding the card that they lied to you about. Now you're holding the other one, the one that they actually lied to you about. So that's the really quick, snappy effect. And even though that does seem like a clever effect, as usual, I have a better alternative for you guys that are interested. If you think that's like an effect that you would be interested in, I would actually recommend you check out Garrett Thomas's effect, which surprisingly is the same name, Lie to Me. It's actually the same exact premise, and it does use a top change too, but it is actually, I think, a stronger effect because in the Garrett Thomas version, he goes through the deck and he takes out a random card and puts it on the table. It says, we'll get back to that. It's kind of almost like a prediction. The same thing happens. A selection is made by the spectator. It's lost in the pack. Pack is shuffled. Then he has the spectator. He says to them, don't tell me your card, but lie to me and tell me a different card. And then he says to them, okay, well, what is your card for real? They tell them the real selection. They reveal the real selection. And then in continuation, they turn over the card that's been on the table, and that's the card that the spectator named when he said, lie to me. So it's kind of nice because it almost seems like the card you put out ahead of time is the card that they lied to you about. How could you have known that? So I thought that was a lot stronger. And you can find that in a couple of different places. Garrett Thomas put that out on his At the Table lecture, as well as I think you can also find that on Real Magic Magazine, which I'm thinking it's still $5 a month. I think it's like the best deal in Magic. He did put it out there on Real Magic Magazine, so you could probably still even learn it there. It's really a great little quick effect. Following that, Daniel Garcia goes over some other card pieces in week 1, which we're just going to touch on briefly. He goes over Fallen. Fallen is a rising card effect where there's a card that's put in the deck and it rises to the top selection. And Fallen actually was a standalone effect that was released on Illusionist a few years ago, so you may already have that. It's not hard to learn. It is a very neat looking rising card effect, especially if you don't do any other kind of rising card effect, or if you want to add that to your ambitious card routine. It's a great alternative there. To me, he goes over his DG box steal, which is called the Damn Good box steal. And he's lectured on that a lot. He actually lectured on that in his Penguin Live lecture, which I think was like from 2012. And it's a very simple move, but very useful. If you've never done it before, you'll be surprised how easy it is. It pretty much almost does it by itself with the motion. And he immediately goes into his most commercial card routine that uses the DG box steal, which is called Timeline 2.0. Now, he's lectured and published that multiple times all over the place. You'll see Timeline 2.0 like on his At the Table lecture, the Penguin Live lecture, all over the place. The routine is extremely simple. It's a mystery card routine. So he takes out a mystery card, he has a spectator sign the back of it, and you put it in a box without seeing the value. In continuation, the spectator makes a selection, and the card that was in the box vanishes from the box, and when they turn over the selection, it has the signature, so it becomes the mystery card. It's your typical mystery card plot effect, very commercial, and so I'm very familiar with it because I've seen it already multiple times, and it is a very simple effect. Following that, he goes into Portal, which is a very visual effect, which in a way it's kind of similar but different, where a selection is made and it's isolated in the box, and then you take two jokers, and you take the two jokers and you use them, you make almost like a portal out of them, because what you're doing is you're kind of bending them like this, so that the way it's almost like there's like a portal between them, and you pull out the selection from between the two jokers. So it's a very nice little visual piece that you're going to like. He did publish that in his manuscript, Something More. So again, it's not new, but it may be new to you because you may not have ever seen it before. After that, he goes into his effect called static cards. And static cards, he lectures on, he's lectured on that in multiple places. I think it was at the table lecture. He also does a version with credit cards as well. But basically, he passes one card over another and one card attracts the other. And that effect is impromptu. It just uses 2 cards, or you could use 2 credit cards. So that's pretty much all of week 1. It gives you an idea of what week 1 is. So besides really the perpendicular top change and Lie to Me, everything else is like a total rehash. But remember, the perpendicular top change was also published too in Something More. So there's virtually nothing new in week 1. When we move to week 2 is all non-card material. And all of this stuff also is a rehash of all his old stuff, with the exception of the new build change, which I already showed you guys. So the new build change is the first item that he shows you. And then he immediately goes into Pressure 2.0, which that's an impromptu penetration of a cell phone into a balloon. And 2.0, I believe, actually was put out by Chris Lyle. I think that was Chris Lyle's handling of Daniel Garcia's effect. In any event, you'll learn Pressure 2 here, which it really went viral back when that was released because everybody was doing it. So if you're not familiar with it, I'd be very surprised, but it's there. Then he goes over a routine which is an impromptu penetration of a straw into a bill. And that's actually a 3-phase routine that he teaches on his Penguin Live lecture. You'll see all the phases. Here he only goes over the first 2 phases because the 3rd phase requires a spectator to hold on to the other side of the straw. I thought that's actually the strongest phase of the 3 phases, is when you have the spectator holding onto the straw and you penetrate the bill through it while you're holding onto the other side. If you're not familiar with it, you probably will like it a lot. It's very visual, it's very easy to do, and it looks great. So again, that's another good effect, but it's not new because, like I said, he released it. I know definitely on the Penguin Live lecture because I have that, but I'm not sure about other places, probably in other places as well. Then he goes over an effect which is kind of a throwaway effect. It's an origami bill ring change, where he basically takes a bill that is folded into quarters, he shakes it, and it changes into an origami bill ring that you can wear. Unfortunately, he doesn't show you how to make the origami bill ring. He just tells you to Google it. So it's kind of a throwaway thing, but it is just a little piece that you might use. Following that, he goes over Joe Blow, which is another effect that he put out years ago on his Project DVD set, which I think was in Project 3 is where he put that one out. And it's another impromptu piece where you take a gum wrapper and you stand it up, and then you are able to make the wrapper fall down by will. When you point to it, it falls down. And it has a couple of different phases, and it's a very clever design of routine because each phase kind of cancels out any thought process of how you're doing it. So you may like that. Again, it's not new, but it's a good effect. It's very simple to do. You might like that a lot. And then the last 2 pieces from the 2nd week comes from his Bent Touch Slink instructional DVD, where he teaches bent, which is like a bent coin effect. Basically, you borrow a coin and you bend it in your own hands. And it's very quick and simple. It's extremely easy to do because it's really almost, it's just like a very quick piece. And then finally, he goes over Slink, which is one of my favorite linking rubber band effects. I actually performed it for years. You can actually see here, this video is actually 7 years old from when I actually videoed that, and you can see the effect. It's very easy to do, and it's very visual. It always gets good reactions, so I would actually recommend that to you if you're not familiar with it. I like it a lot. So that's pretty much all of week 2. As you can see, the only new item on week 2 really is that new build change. Everything else is just a rehash of old stuff. Week 3 is just that breakout jam session where he goes over his creative process. and it really felt like just a brainstorming session. Unfortunately, I felt that that was really completely a waste for me. I felt that it could have been a lot better. As I mentioned, he could have just used like a half an hour of time doing that, and then he could have like actually lectured on something else. Unfortunately, I mean, for the money that you're paying, I think that that was a real waste. And then the last week, which was the Zoom Hangout Q&A session, unfortunately, I found that that also was really just a waste of time. The only thing in that Q&A session that I really thought was useful was he does give you some tips on how to make the perpendicular top change a little bit more invisible, which I thought that was really useful. Otherwise, the questions that people asked were really lame. Most people ask questions about his life, about what he does and stuff. I mean, if you're really interested in him as a person, that's great, but that's not going to help you with your magic overall. Some of the questions they asked for advice about magic are very standard questions. And somebody asked him about why he has a waiter or waitress order his food for him when he goes to a restaurant. I mean, who cares? It's just silly, some of these questions that these people ask. So that's pretty much what you can expect on this lecture series. And as I mentioned, if you're familiar with his effects and stuff, and you've been following along collecting his magic over the years, then you probably should just skip over this lecture series. I would rate this lecture series as a 3 out of 5 because a lot of the stuff, especially from the second week, is very solid magic that you can use, and I like that the impromptu nature of it. So I definitely would give that like 3 out of 5. As usual, if you have any questions or comments about this or anything else that I review, please leave it below. And thanks so much, guys, for tuning into my magic reviews. I'll see you on the next one.